Hey, this is Kenny Maine. This is not my podcast. I'm just the introductory voice doing a favor for an old friend. He somehow thinks this is going to help his success. We'll find out. I sure hope so, though, because I've known Keith Simons since we were like 10 or 11 years old. We played boys club football together back in Federal Way, Washington. Then we played against each other in junior high and high school. He went on to college. I went on to college. He went on to coach college and then tutor quarterbacks pretty much the rest of his life. And he got so deep and nerdy into the art of quarterbacking that he decided to start a podcast called QB Unfiltered. There will be far better quarterbacks than I as guests on this show, but I'm just here to say, listen, you might learn something.
This is QB Unfiltered. I'm Coach Keith Simons. This is Constructing the Quarterback. And this is the Heisman Trophy edition. When you throw a ball as a quarterback, and the way that I always describe the throws to my guys is I attach numbers to the throw. So if you throw a 1, that's putting the ball on a rope, on a line, putting some gas on the throw. Hitch routes, dig routes, curl routes, you're throwing a 1. A 2 is a softer throw with a little bit of air underneath it. And examples of when you would throw a 2 are throwing outside verticals in the red zone, okay, where you just want to touch it into the corner of the end zone, possibly throwing corner routes versus a cover 2 coverage where you're dropping it over a squat corner and away from the safety coming off the hash. That's a 2. And then you've got a 3. And anytime you're throwing in the open field, an outside vertical or a post route, you want to put a lot of air under the ball. That's a 3. And the reason you throw it that way is to allow your receiver to make a play on the throw if it's not perfect, okay? If you put air underneath the throw and you overthrow your wideout, he can go get it. He can catch up to the throw. If you underthrow him, he can use his receiver skills to slip the corner and go up and high point the rock. But if you throw a post or an outside vertical with a 2, so you're throwing it flatter and you overthrow it, the play's over. Your receiver has no chance to go get it. You watch Daniels throw outside verts and posts, he's putting 3s under the ball and dropping it right in the basket. Again, well coached. Now you get him in a situation where they're throwing an outside vertical in the red zone from the 25-yard line in. He doesn't want to throw a 3 to an outside receiver. He now wants to throw a 2, take air off of it, but also touch it out there and put it to the corner of the end zone. And he does that throw after throw after throw. Welcome. This is QB Unfiltered. I'm Coach Keith Simons, and this is Man to Man Monday. Today, we're joined by legendary Seattle Seahawks quarterback Jim Zorn. Everybody knows Jim's story, but real briefly, 11 years in the NFL, broke in 1976, was named the AFC Offensive Player of the Year that year, breakout year, electrified the city of Seattle and the state of Washington and NFL in general. When he was done playing, moved into the coaching field, coached in college, and then spent a long time in the NFL as a quarterback coach and offensive coordinator. Welcome, Jim.
Well, thanks for having me on your show. You know, interestingly enough, in 1976, you said I was AFC, but in fact, we were NFC that year. And then we moved to the AFC, stayed in the AFC, but and now the Seahawks are back in the NFC. So, we were all in the NFC our very first year because there were 2 expansion teams, us and Tampa. Anyway,
right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it's all confusing. Bottom line is, when you came into the league, I don't think the NFL had seen anybody like you, and you've been compared, or they compared you at the time, to Fran Tarkenton, and Fran would scramble around and buy time in the pocket, but you were a different guy. I mean, they had designed quarterback draws for you to run. You were the first dual threat quarterback in the NFL. Thoughts?
Well, I was, I could run up the field. That really is a good observation, and it was different than what had been happening in the NFL at that time. I was always given the freedom if I saw a coverage where it would be a two deep safety with a man underneath, and there were only four rushers. Nobody had me, so I could audible to a quarterback draw. And so there were games when we knew a team was going to play this particular coverage, and we called it two man. Most hosts on television call it two man,
Right.
And I could audible. So I would audible and I would just follow my center and then break off of him whichever direction that he was headed. So yeah, I ran up the field. We did have we had a series called the Sprint Draw series that allowed me to get outside and run up the field as well if I needed to.
Would you rather play in today's environment with the quarterback, hands off, flag football, two-hand touch, or when you played?
Well, listen, I do not believe that it's two-hand touch, flag football. It's still, when a quarterback plays, he doesn't get hit in practice. Because you have to preserve him, and yet they take shots, even though they're protected a bit more.
Right.
Some of the things that happen in a game, they're trying to create an opportunity for the quarterback to last, because people come to see the QB to play.
Right.
I would go to a lot of these games to watch the skill level of these quarterbacks, the way they can throw, the decision making. It is amazing. But I don't believe it's a touch football game at all.
Right.
Because you can still take shots, and these guys still get injured. There's several QBs that are injured this year that just are having to watch their season. So I think we, as we were early in the game. I would love to play today's game, but not because of that. I think that the strategies are still there in bigger ways because defenses are much more complex. Right. I know more about the game than I did when I played, and so I would love to play in today's game. But I wasn't. I'm not disappointed in my time in the game. We played some really competitive seasons, and I wish we would have gone to the Super Bowl early, but I didn't know anything about expansion teams and the development of a team, the draft, how the draft is formed, and all that kind of stuff until I was almost out of the league.
Yeah, so that leads you to my next question. I was a high school senior when you were a rookie, and I'm sure that you were the same way as I was, that we played the game with our ability that we developed on our own and had the ability to throw the ball accurately and play the position. What's your thoughts on the quarterback environment today with these high school kids, private QB trainers, these camps, which are really well done, and these guys are getting coached so that when they go into college now, they're so much more advanced than we were?
I think the QBs that are coming out need to have when you were in high school, you definitely wanted to have a sound release. But I think there are a lot of gaps in football 101.
Right.
That it takes time because a lot of QBs, if you will, and even parents, they would think, hey, I just want you to throw with my son. But classroom and learning defense, that's part of the game as well. And just learning about football in general. Right. A lot of gaps that kids have that you need to fill those gaps. And some of them do in college and some of them never will.
Hey, did you ever jerry rig any of your equipment, like your shoulder pads or anything, to give you better flexibility in throwing?
I took a foam pad out of my throwing arm because I felt I had more freedom. Mm-hmm. I had our equipment manager add a panel in my arm because I didn't. we had sleeves with stripes on them, and they came down to here. And today's game, the sleeves they have a little elastic around them, and they're up real tight, so your arm has freedom. But so we had to keep the stripes. So I had the equipment guy put a bigger panel in my, maybe a 3-inch strip in my sleeve, so it could be loose. I didn't do much else. I had we had a towel, and now you have to wear an official towel that is approved by the NFL. But I just wore a washcloth basically in front of my belt, and guys used to ask me to borrow my towel, and so I give them my towel, and then they go. And then they give it back to me, and I have to, keep my hands dry. So instead of having all that slobber on my face towel, I started getting a second towel, a second wash. I called it my guest towel. And so when a guy would ask for my towel, I said, sure, but I'd give him my guest towel, and then I'd shove that back into my britches.
That's good thinking.
Yeah, so I think you have to learn those things as you go along.
Right.
There are a lot of snot bubbles out there.
So throwing the ball, what was your worst weather condition that you didn't like, that affected you throwing?
Probably that affects every QB is high winds. Those are, rain, not a big deal because you get to exchange the ball a lot. Snow, pretty fun. Game slows down, except, you can throw through the snow. But so high winds, because you had to change trajectories, you had to make sure you spun the ball, you had to control the ball. And based on if you were throwing left or right, that affected it based on the wind and which direction you were going, on the field during quarters. So you had to have a good decision to where, did you want the wind in the fourth quarter? Do you want to throw against the wind? Is the wind coming left and right? There's a lot of things to decide as a QB.
So this may sound like a silly question, but when you're playing in a wind environment, when you're warming up before the game, did you make it a conscious effort to throw both directions with the wind and against the wind?
Yes. Yeah. It made a conscious effort, but to control the ball for a lefty, I wanted to throw with the wind coming right to my left because it kept the nose of my ball straight. If I was throwing and I was left-handed and the wind was coming from left to right, my ball would tail. The ball naturally, because it's spinning like this in the wind, every ball catches it. And the right-handers, it would be just the opposite.
Right. So,
so I would, figured that out early in my career. And if you're throwing in that, some part of the game, you're throwing in the very worst way you possibly could throw, where the wind is coming left to right, your ball's going down the field, and so your ball is going to get blown to the right, and it's going to turn and tail this way. So how do you figure those things out? Right. I think number one, you got to throw hard, and you change your trajectory a little bit, and the ball is maybe not as affected. If you get the ball up in the air,
right.
You can't control it, and you don't figure the wind a little bit, it'll affect it. Much like a golfer or a kicker kicking in a stadium with a lot of wind.
So when you were coaching the quarterbacks, you talked to your guys about that.
Well, that's the danger. You want the quarterback to figure that out. You might, because you don't know what the weather's going to be like. So you go out in a pregame, and all of a sudden it's howling, and those are the we try to prepare our QBs for everything, and so in practice when it's windy. Hey, we could have a windy game one of these days. You take that opportunity to start working those ideas in drill work. Then you take it to the team and you try to practice it before you get to anything. But you could practice in high winds, but game 4 is when the wind comes up. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So you've already talked about it. And, I think there's a conversation, but it cannot become a distraction. And it never can become an excuse. I would cringe if I heard a QB saying, yeah, the wind really affected me today.
Right.
Oh, wait a minute. Did we not work on that? Did we not talk about that? So you cannot, it may have, but nobody allows those kinds of reasonings for not completing a pass or anything like that. The QB has to take full control of that. Does he have full control? He may not, but he has to make those little adjustments to get a completed pass. And the guy who taught me one really important concept was Steve Largent, who was one of my key wide receivers in the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
But Steve used to say, listen, it's my job, it's our job as receivers to catch the ball. So Z-Man, I do not care if the ball comes end over end. I'm going to catch it.
Right.
So if it's wobbly, if it's not a tight spiral, no big deal. Just get me the ball and make it catchable. And so, sometimes in high winds, QBs, you and I, we don't have the chance to throw a ball with this really tight spiral coming in with the nose of the ball right there. It's going to be like it's coming in sideways sometimes.
Right.
And so the receiver still has to catch it. So it's our job to make those little adjustments, but we still are responsible for the completion.
I want to talk about Steve Largent for just a second. I know you guys are buddies. We're tight, and that's a big part of a quarterback receiver combination. But talk to me about the unspoken language that you had between each other and how that played out on the field.
Yeah, I think we both had the same. Excuse me. We had the same outlook on the game. From day one, he wanted to be really good. I wanted to be really good, and so our communication had to be as best as it could be. And so he would work after practice or before practice. We would work on issues that were possibly going to come up. And I'll give you an example. If we had a team that changed coverages a lot, and we were going to run a comeback, a deep out during that game at some point, or that was going to be a key throw. After practice, we would work on the different types of technique a DB would play in a game, and what Steve was thinking. We would talk about what he was thinking based on the leverage of that defender. For example, if the defender was off and hard inside, he would run his comeback. He would just take him straight up the field, try to get him to run vertically, and then come out of it. And he was really good because he had a low center of gravity. He could be out of breaks really quick.
Right.
But if the DB was pressed on him, and we still had the comeback on, I knew that he was probably, if he got hung up, and all I could do was just peek because I was trying to keep the other defender inside, a safety inside, so I could isolate him one-on-one outside or not get a flat defender to move outside.
Right.
So my eyes weren't totally on him, but I would peek.
Right.
And, it would be almost pre-snap that so he's got press man. He's going to come out of it maybe 2 yards shorter. If he gets bumped or if he gets grabbed or whatever, it might be 2 yards shorter. But I had to be right on target because the DB was that much closer. And so I had to anticipate that. So the ball was already in the air when he was going to make his break. And we could, you could say, hey, now the guy's soft and outside, or he's pressing, he's bailing out. There's just different ways. And we would express and practice all the different types of breaks. So when I'd look out during a game, I was very comfortable. It didn't matter how the DB was playing because I knew how Steve was going to come out of that break. And we did that on many different types of concepts and patterns. He was a perfectionist, right?
Yeah, right.
And there's a reason he's in the NFL Hall of Fame, and that was just a small portion of why he was as good as he was.
Let's talk coverages. What was your pre-snap checklist for determining coverage?
Well, it was indicators, right? And the better teams would disguise coverage. So you walked up to the line of scrimmage, and there were always things that I try to train QBs to do even today. And that is, as you walk up to the line of scrimmage, don't wait, especially early in the game. Get up and get your snap count started. The gun has made it harder because, QBs are not necessarily the better QBs, the better offenses. You have to see what the front guys are aligned, because now you either have a back or you have a 5-man protection, don't have a back. You have a possibility of bringing in a tight end to block. You have a back to block, or you can bring him in to block. And so you have to know, number one, how you're going to be protected. That's number one. Then number two, trusting those guys that they're going to pick them up. So before the snap, you've got to try to get an idea of coverage. And the better defenses always give you the same exact look pre-snap, and then at the snap they go into their coverage.
Right.
And so Jerry Rome taught me that, and I've used this as a coach, is that don't wait. Don't go up to the line of scrimmage and stand there. And I always hear the announcers, "Oh, he's looking over the looking over the field. He's trying, And if you can go fast and not allow a defense to wait, they'll get into their coverage scheme much quicker." All right. So there's a lot of things going on as the QB's getting up to the line of scrimmage.
Jim, as a quarterback coach, what was your best drill?
Oh, gosh. I've got about 30 drills. And I drove Mike Holmgren a little bit wacky with some of the drills that I had. I have a lot of different drills. It's really hard to single one out. But I would say probably the better drills for a QB today are ones that he can move, but not the pitter-patter movements. It's more of explosive moves to get him out from the pocket and to throw on the run, or get out of the pocket, have to stop and throw, or different things of that nature. It's change of direction. Probably a lot of the QB coaches today I see they have bags laying down and the QBs shuffle. They have shuffling. I think that's great for quick feet. We used to do rope drills, with a elevated little ladder ropes, that you can kind of move your feet through.
Right.
Those are good drills. But in the game, those drills are good for in the pocket movement, where you have to move your feet, but get a base and then let the ball go. My drill for that was using those big, you call them like a big, would it be a Pilates ball or a yoga ball? One of those big yoga balls that you inflate, and they're kind of harmless, but they can bounce off you, right? Mm-hmm. So I used to have my quarterbacks. One would be across from me, and there'd be a quarterback in the middle, and I'm throwing these big balls at the QB, and the QB had to physically move, reset, because another ball was coming from he would turn to that quarterback, and then he would have to move, and then the one ball I threw would be coming back at me,
Right.
and then the QB would turn, and it really got the QB to know that he had to physically get out of the way, and instead of just pitter-pattering his feet and
Right.
and shuffling like this. I remember many times sitting in my classroom with Trent Dilfer, Matt Hasselbeck, who was our starter, Seneca Wallace, and say and have the video on and say, okay, watch Matt do it in the game, do an actual perform a task to get a completion, and it was the very drill that we had worked on in practice. Hey, that was the drill right there. That was the drill, and so I think I tried to inject confidence in them that I wasn't going to waste their time, but I was going to give them the real stuff so that they could play the game with. And one of the war cries, and I think if I was going to coach anybody, I would say, whatever drills you do, you teach the drill with the technique, but make it full speed, because the game is played at full. You can teach it going half speed to get the feel for it, but at some point, you got to have these guys work full speed, because that's the game.
In high school, you were a multi-sport guy, and speed skating. You were a speed skater. That's unique.
So I drove Zamboni machines, and the guy that owned the ice skating rink that I worked at was Frank Zamboni. He actually owned an ice skating rink in Paramount, California, and I worked as a guard there. And we didn't have hockey; it was a little bit bigger ice slab of ice, but we had a speed skating team called Demora, and I wanted to skate fast, and so it was pretty fun. So we did indoor short track skating indoor, and I was not in the fastest group though. I was there were senior A's, and those were the senior A men. Those are the speed demons. Those were the guys that would go, were working out, traveling all around, going to the Olympics or these nationals. I was in the senior B men, and I pretty much stayed around California with our group. But I won, and I won some championships and stuff as a senior B man. And I worked all the way through college, and I speed skated in college. I think that helped me become a better football player because it helped me with my feet. Mm-hmm. There were other sports I did as well during high school and actually college. I played four different sports. There's a fifth out there, but 4 sports for sure in college. I speed skated, obviously. I played intercollegiate badminton. I was on the badminton team, and that really helped my feet. And that's really a great game. Then I threw the javelin in track my senior year because we didn't have a javelin thrower. So the track coach asked me to throw it, and he taught me how to do it, and I threw the javelin. Then I played football, but I surfed as well in Southern California, and I could throw the heck out of a Frisbee.
Why do you think left-handed quarterbacks look so cool throwing the ball?
Well, if you look at them in a mirror, they throw just like a right-handed quarterback.
Right.
I've checked that out. But the ball, it is different, and it is unique. If you're a linebacker or a DB and you see a left-handed QB, it's harder to feel how to break with a left-handed quarterback. If I was going to face a left-handed QB all week long, I would try to get somebody who was left-handed to play that show team quarterback, but I would also have my coaches get somebody who was going to throw the ball in drill work to linebackers and DBs, show them what a left-handed look is, because it is it's a weird feeling. And I know that we can take advantage of that as lefties, because we're left-handed. We don't do anything different. It just because of how we drop and how we look, it does look strange to a defender.
This has been a real thrill for me, Jim, to do this and talk ball with you. This is great for Seattle Seahawks fans, but really valuable for coaches out there, college and high school, gold, some of the stuff that you've gone over. I really appreciate it. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this. Thank you, Jim.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Bye now.
This is constructing the quarterback. Today's topic, parents save your money. This is what I call the lie that you're going to get from that coach or that director of the travel team that comes to ask you for your son to come play for him. Blah, 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 blah. We're going to be seen on social media. We're going to go against all this phenomenal competition in all of these tournaments. And here comes the lie. By your son playing for my 7-on-7 travel team, his recruiting, the recruitment of him by the four-year colleges is going to increase dramatically. Every Division I football program is looking at these 7-on-7 films and recruiting your son off of those films. That is a lie. That's a lie. Any D1 coach, D2, D3, NAIA, junior college, head coach or quarterback coach or offensive coordinator, they don't evaluate quarterbacks off a 7-on-7 film. That's crazy. Like we said before, it's a pristine environment. There's no pass rush. There's no game environment. The quarterbacks get recruited based on what they look like on their high school game film. That's how they get recruited, not the 7-on-7 travel team film, okay? They get recruited with game film. They get recruited by being a good student. They get recruited by having the proper GPA in the NCAA approved core classes. They get recruited for their test scores on the ACT or the SAT, not 7-on-7 travel film. That's a lie. This is QB Unfiltered. I'm Coach Keith Simons. Today I'm joined by iconic ESPN SportsCenter anchor and former Totem Junior High and UNLV Runnin' Rebs quarterback, Kenny Maine. It's Man-to-Man Monday. Welcome, Kenny.
You couldn't do better than me. I mean, I could just on my phone give you like 5 better quarterbacks, but I'm honored. Not everybody would know this, obviously. Keith and I grew up south of Seattle, this place called Federal Way, Washington. We played boys club football together. Mel Shiley at the helm, right? He was our coach. Yeah. Lyle Foltz, I believe, was out there.
Yep.
Then I moved on to Mr. Sansever's team. You moved to a different division in 7th grade. Then we played against each other. You were at Kylo. I was at Totem. I was at Jefferson. You were at Federal Way. You were at Spokane. I was at Wenatchee in junior college. And then we went our different ways. I went to UNLV. You did a little Idaho State. A lot of connections, and we stayed, somewhat consistent and staying in touch with each other through the years. And I'm happy to be a little part of your show, which I think is going to be fun.
What are you doing these days?
I made a movie called Wiffle Ball, and it's a comedy documentary about a day in 1989 where Ken Griffey Jr. and I threw wiffle balls together at the Seattle Science Center. And I've maintained, I still think it's true, that I beat him by 1 mile per hour. Now, he might not have been throwing full speed. Maybe he had a game that night. Who knows? But once he heard my number, you could tell that he definitely threw harder on the next couple. He was pissed when he goes to Harold Reynolds. He threw 61. And honestly, it wasn't even a real wiffle ball. It turns out it was like a pre-era pickleball. It had the fakey wiffle balls with all the holes, right?
Right.
Anyway, we did like a true documentary. We interviewed a professor at the University of Washington. We went to the Science Center. We returned there. Tried to get Griffey. He was not involved, but he's in there with the old pictures. So hopefully people like it. We got Ken Burns in it. Right now we're trying to sell it. I'm also working on a little NIL thing, little project with regard to that. I know you have some opinions on that. But it's free market. Coaches get $20 million to walk away. Why can't the players get paid? I'm kind of like for the free enterprise of it all.
Yeah. Okay. That's another topic. So let's stay on the wiffle ball theme. I know you had a wiffle ball park stadium that you played at as a kid. So did I. Tell me about yours.
Well, what I love about everybody's wiffle ball stories is how each park truly unique in the same way that major league parks are, right? If you grew up at Wrigley, you're talking about Wrigley. And if you grew up, wherever, Dodger Stadium. So our main field was called Alma Memorial. That was for my grandma who passed away. My dad, who was not like the greatest builder in the world, like my grandfather owned a hardware store. My dad could sort of fix a couple things. And then I'm just an imbecile. Like Gretchen has to put all the stuff together at Christmas. He built an outfield fence. We got signage so we could have fake advertising like minor league parks out on the wall. Mark Sansevier, who you played against him, he broke Babe Ruth's home run record in one summer. We kept stats every game. Like we were just so nerdy about it. And we played day and night. I mean, we'd sometimes start at 9 a.m., play for 3 hours, go swimming, come back, play till 5, get dinner, play a couple more before the sun went down. We had kind of quirky rules there because the field was really narrow and it really wasn't that long. So we had quote unquote medium pitch. It was very subjective. You'd like, that was not medium pitch. You'd argue after the play, right?
Right.
At the other field down by the lake, we would throw fast pitch at a greater distance. Then it was just home run into the lake. I mean, it was pretty obvious what happened, but it was also dangerous because there was like, some kind of stonework on the edge. You didn't want to be like falling on the fence. But yeah, we grew up with it. We loved it. We'd always pretend to be other players. I was always the old Cincinnati Reds because, we didn't have the Mariners until you and I were seniors, I guess.
Yep.
So in the old days, I was the big red machine. I can still list that lineup probably better than most major league lineups today.
Right.
But it was fun. You probably weren't supposed to play it if you were competing at a high level of baseball. It might have thrown off your timing, but I kind of threw in the towel on baseball. I could never hit, so I kind of quit on that.
Let's jump into a little ESPN stuff here. And you were there for 27 years. Iconic, legendary anchors worked with you. Who was your best bro? Who was the guy you went out and had beers with?
You know what? I don't like I thought you were going to ask who was the best one to do it with, because I had fun with just about everybody. I mean, obviously, Stuart Scott and I were very close. We both had children coming up. His were just slightly older, about the same time period. And I just was telling the story the other day because it was Thanksgiving, how Stuart and I would watch, either we'd work together or if we had the day off, we'd watch the games on TV while playing electric football. Remember the little tiny plastic men that buzz around the aluminum board?
Right.
I introduced electric football to a bunch of young kids this Thanksgiving. We went to some friend's house. They'd never heard of it, never seen it, and they were absolutely mesmerized by it. It's so dumb. The players just spin in circles and they won't do what you want, but there's something kind of cool about it. You're kind of like orchestrating, putting them where you want. You hope it's just like coaching, right? You put them in the right spot to succeed,
right,
and you hope they listen. They don't always do so. The quarterback sucks. You can never throw with the electric football quarterback. So what we do is we take one player off. You put the ball on the field. That's where the quarterback has dropped back to, and you have to stop the machine before the defensive player gets to that line. And then you flick it with your middle finger and you try to hit the base. So still love the game. I haven't played it in a while, but it was great to bring it back out. But yeah, Stuart was definitely, all through the years, Neil Everett, Scott Van Pelt, John Anderson, Butch Gross. I'm leaving out a bunch of people, and a bunch of people you don't know, Bill Pito also, but a bunch of people you wouldn't know that are behind the scenes that have stayed really good friends. I golf with one of them all the time. So I'm still in Connecticut. I left ESPN 2 years ago, but I got remarried, and the last of our 4 daughters is still in high school back here in Connecticut. The others are all over the place. We've got a Seattle, Atlanta, USC, Los Angeles, and the last one, we'll find out where she goes to school and find out what I'm doing for work.
Okay. So when you were hired at ESPN, did they have any restrictions on you on what you could do on air, or did they just say, do your thing?
Well, it's a great question, because what was kind of fun about that was I came in under ESPN2. Remember when they started the new channel in like 93, I think it was? And I had a TV job in Seattle that I quit for some reason. I went like 4 years out of TV, but trying to get back into it. And I was still freelancing for ESPN and Prime and who else? TSN in Canada, NBA Entertainment, whoever would have me. And it kind of kept me in the game. It kept me motivated to try to get back at it. And I just wore ESPN down. I sent them letters. I sent them tapes. I begged them. And when they added ESPN2, there came an open, hey, we need more people. So I kind of got lucky. Keith Olbermann went back to one to be with Dan Patrick. Remember, he was out there in the leather jacket with Susie Colbert and all that.
Yeah.
And he went back to Sports Center. Stuart moved up to sit next to Susie at the main anchor desk. They needed one more guy, and that was me. But at the beginning, because we were a little different, we were intentionally trying to be different than Sports Center, like a little looser, didn't have to wear a suit and tie. It was, just a looser environment. I think some of them were puzzled by me. I'm certain they were. But there were others who were very receptive and said, keep doing it, dude. You have a knack for it. Just keep being yourself and don't worry about how it's judged or whatever. And I think that was a really good thing for me. Instead of immediately getting put on Sports Center, I would have been nervous having not been on TV forever. And, the first time you ever did Sports Center, you definitely are nervous. It's like a big deal.
Right.
Larry Beal was my co-host, and he was great. He was like a big brother, taking care of me, making sure I had all my paperwork. And because you can get lost out there. There's a lot of stuff flying, a lot of changes, people in your ear. There's names of players you've never heard of. Like that, there's a lot of stuff to keep track of. You try to minimize. It's sort of like everything goes back to quarterbacking. Like a quarterback, don't make mistakes. Just keep us either punt or score. Don't get picked. That was kind of the mindset.
Keep matriculating the ball down the field kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your favorite catchphrase that you came up with?
Well, you remember Warren Thomas. You lived with him, our good musical friend. Rest in peace.
Yep.
So he had this bit, I'm sure you saw him do it, where he was talking about when you're in college and you get your student loan. He was a comedian. He had this big bit about, I'm king of the dorms. Let there be Cheetos for all my men. And, that's kind of how you did feel, right? So I adapted that with, I am king of the diamond. Let there be a clubhouse feast. Because if you go into major league clubhouses, even the fancy teams, it's kind of, most of them are kind of bare bones. It's a bunch of cold cuts. It looks like you're in junior high again on break.
Yeah.
So that just kind of became the running one. There were tons of them. It was fun to make up new ones and get rid of the old ones. Sometimes I would bring out a little list and like, hey, try to use these 7 tonight, one way or the other. So you didn't write it. You just kind of had notes to decide like, oh, that's a perfect spot, to say put one in the air for Steph Curry or something. Okay.
Hey, what was the craziest interview you ever did with a pro athlete?
Man, well, my favorite was Stevie Wonder. He's like my one, quote unquote idol, if you will. Yep. Just I revere him in a different way than really anyone. He's sort of a prophet. I got to work with him like 3 times. The very first time was back in Seattle when I was a little intern reporter just coming up. They threw me on the street. I did like a Midway landfill story about methane gas. I remember that was my first one. It was terrible. And then the next day, Stevie Wonder was coming to Seattle to start a concert series, and Seattle was the first stop. They were going to have a rehearsal at the old Coliseum, which is now Climate Pledge. Yeah. And I got to go in there, and I was up on the stage to interview him. I was so nervous. My hand was shaking, and I think I just set it on the keyboard. So he's talking, and you hear like, dong, and he just reached over and turned it to 0 and didn't get mad. He kept talking. Yeah. So many years later, when the Seahawks played the Steelers in Detroit, Stevie was the warm-up at the Super Bowl. The Rolling Stones played at halftime, and he used to open for them back in the day. I got to interview him again, and I told him that story, and I said, so essentially we've collaborated. And he laughed and was like, all right, let's make the album. And then the other time, I got him to say, I can't be at the baseball all-star game. I have a high ankle sprain. And he did it one take. It was perfect. So, being around him, number one, I'd say when Dale Earnhardt won his Daytona 500, that was a pretty cool night. And I didn't grow up a car fan at all, but they assigned me to be on this car racing show. Quickly learned it up, got into it. Jerry Punch helped, Benny Parsons helped, Ryan McGee, all these guys gave me the knowledge to figure out how to pull off a car racing show, having never really covered the sport. So being around those guys. And then I think the all-timer, though, for both weirdness and what was at stake maybe, I was sent down, I think it was to Florida, to do a thing with Tiger Woods. That was supposed to be just sort of a fluff piece. He had a new, I think it was a video game. He had some kind of promotion thing with the company, and we were being allowed to get to interview him, have some fun, tell about this new project, right? Turns out he got injured like 2 days before, the day before, rather, the news came out. I think it was a knee, but I'm not positive. And they tell us walking in, no questions about the injury, just only talk about the video game or whatever it was, right? I said, well, I may be a complete screw-off, but I still have some journalism background, right? That's what I studied originally. I can't not ask that question. Like, you can not answer it, but I'm not going in that room and being the idiot that didn't bring up the most significant news in the sport right that day. So I asked like 12 different ways. He gave somewhat of an answer. Finally, I kind of beat him down, but it was very tense, very awkward, because his handlers were like looking at me like I'm a jerk. I'm like, guys, if I had come here to talk about the weather and the sun had exploded yesterday, we kind of have to mention the old sun just blew up, right? So we got through it and didn't get to work with him too much. I was around him a few times at the PGA Tour events and the U.S. Open. Got to do it with a lot of other golfers. That was a fun period of my life, going to the big golf tournaments and making up ridiculous stories.
How amazing was it to watch Tiger in person
Well, at his peak too, right? Like when he was really getting after it. Just another category, right? It's like when you compare the greats of any sport.
Yeah.
But the other thing too was, you didn't want to be the guy to have your cell phone go off while he's putting. So whenever I got near him, anywhere near him, within 100 yards, this is the old cell phones, right? I would take the battery out, like it's disabled. I delete my account. I'm not going to be that guy.
Right. Good thinking. So
we
let's
had another.
Yeah,
we
go
had
ahead.
a really fun one with David Duval. Remember, he was competing with Tiger, held number one for a while. And then he just kind of fell apart. He kind of lost his touch on the game.
Right.
And while he was in the middle of that, I somehow talked him into going to a miniature golf course to work out the yips. Yeah. And he laughed. He said, I'll do it. That's funny. He had the humility to say, I know my game kind of sucks right now. Why not kind of make a joke of it? Maybe laughing about it will help me. Who knows? So he was a great guy to work with.
Let's talk a little football. Back with the Totem T-Birds, junior high, did you wear a face mask with the bar going right down the middle?
What's funny about that? I was not a great equipment guy. I've seen pictures of me at UNLV, and I'm like, why was I wearing such a dorky face mask? Did Larry Chin, the equipment manager, just hand me, here you go, here's your helmet, and I didn't argue? So I didn't pay as much attention to that, I guess, but I could see at least. It's funny, junior high football, I was little. My sophomore year in high school, I was 5'8", 137 pounds. The next year, junior, where I started playing, I was 6'2". I grew 6 inches in 1 year.
Yeah.
But in junior high, I was trying to get over 100, right? I was 105 or 112, whatever it was. Kind of scrawny out there. I could throw, but I wasn't strong, right? I was just accurate and throw. But we had another kid, Bruce Humphreys, who was like a full-grown man. I mean, he's driving the car to school. He does a job probably. And the coach, Lou Blasey and Al Hoppenrath, Lou Blasey, who wouldn't look at the two of us and go, well, this guy makes more sense. He's developed, this other guy's a dork. He's good for scout team, which I did a lot of. So I finally played a little bit in my 9th grade year, and then I broke my leg again. So now I've broken my femur in 6th grade. Now I've broken my left ankle, and I was going to start that week in 9th grade, but I still want to play. It's right. We love the game, and I kept thinking, I'm going to get better, I'm going to get bigger, I'm going to figure this out, and it's the one thing I could do. I could always throw stuff. Couldn't do much else. I was a terrible shooter. I was a terrible hitter. Wasn't that fast. I was very average speed, but I could throw a football. And I started it's funny, I started throwing an NFL ball when I was 12. My dad got me one. My hands were big enough to handle it. And I got so used to it that using the junior high or high school fakey rubber balls felt weird to me. I'd rather use the real one. But when we were at UNLV, we used NFL balls. They just added a stripe to it to conform with the stripe rule. And each of us, we had our ball. It's funny. I have one right here. I often I either have dice, a pen, or a football when I'm doing an interview. It just feels good to have a little pacifier, something that you touched all your life. And I always tell the young kids that, who are trying to come up in the game, whether it's soccer, football, whatever it is, you should constantly. How many times have you seen kids walking down the street in Seattle with a basketball dribbling, right? You get to the point where you have such a association and a feel for that thing that you want to use in the real court of the field, and it makes sense. It looks dorky to some people, but the more you touch and have a feel for that thing that you're going to try to do something with. So I'm Jamal Crawford's a friend, and he one day was saying something about it makes me mad, man. I don't see kids walking to school dribbling like they used to. So I was in New York City for some reason, and I saw a kid doing this. So I took a film of it, sent it to him, like, hey, it's still happening out there.
Hey, I did a clinic talk at a national coaches convention where I talked about quarterback play, and I discussed about your quarterback should be spinning the ball on their index finger, flipping it up and catching it, and doing all kinds of hand-eye stuff with the ball. And I got like crickets and just stunned looks from the coaches.
Oh my God. You can tell somebody like Mahomes has been doing that all his life. The way he's able to change his position, the angles, and throw these weird ways. I remember playing junior college. I got rushed and I started rolling the opposite way. And this, one of those crazy things you're trying to escape from. And I had a guy right on me. So I just moved it to my left hand. Didn't throw it very far. I threw like a wobbly 10-yard to a guy who was wide open. But if I had my right arm, the guy was right. He was going to get me here. That was the only way. I love it when you see Russell Wilson does it still. He did it not so much this last game, but a couple before where stuff's jammed up and he's about to get sacked, but he sees a guy at the last second, just as long as it's safe, not just heaving it, but you have some reason to flip it and escape the sack or whatever. Or the other one is you're running down the field, and you're like escaping the rush. Now you're scrambling up the field. There might be a better guy 3 feet away. Let him do it. Let the 4-2 guys go.
Exactly. That's what they get scholarship for.
Yeah.
So grab that football, Kenny. Let me see how many fingers you put on the laces when you throw.
I have the ring finger.
Yeah.
And the pinky barely touches.
Okay. Move that, slide that just a little. There you go. Huh. Yeah. Cool.
That's funny. I know. Is it Kurt Warner?
It's Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw.
Back here.
Yeah, Terry Bradshaw. That's crazy. How do you do that?
That feels so weird.
Can you imagine what we would have been like if we would have had QB trainers and the knowledge that these high school kids have now as high school quarterbacks and going into college? I mean, we just played with our natural ability, throw to the guy who's open type deal in high school.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole game has evolved. There wasn't the 7-on-7 passing academies back then. You might go to a football camp for a few days or whatever, but absolutely. The recognition of what to do, walk up to the line. Jim Zorn taught me this about you walk up to the line and try to do the same thing every time. Always just glance left to right. And then you're never like, oh, I'm going over that way. Try to have the same patterning every time. I also remember him talking. So out of college, I actually signed a free agent deal with the Seahawks. The kid ahead of me, Sam King, turned it down to go to Canada originally. And I threw for my little tryout that it was the June of '82, I think it was. Who's in the locker room but Steve Largent? Like when people do those tryouts, it's pretty ad hoc. It's, hey, somebody come out and run some routes. It's like 10 minutes. I get to throw to Steve Largent, which I was like, you're kidding. So I was nervous and happy at the same time because I knew he's going to, catch it off his shoes and everything. The guy said he did terrible. That was the report on me. Jim Rome. I signed like the worst contract ever. Just whatever. I just signed it as fast as I could. Ended up failing the physical because of my ankle, so I never really got into the full thing. But I got to throw for like those 3 weeks between then and the camp. And it's funny. I didn't think I was beating out Zorn or Dave Craig was back up to him, but I didn't feel out of place at all with the others, the rookies and whoever else. You can kind of feel it, right? If you go out to a workout and guys are in the lines to run routes, you can just tell who can get it there, quick, who does this and that.
So who was your favorite quarterback growing up?
Well, way back, Bart Starr, just because when I'm 7 years old and he sneaks across in the Ice Bowl to beat Dallas.
Right.
I swear to God, I remember that game.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Watching the Bowl. And we didn't have a team in Seattle until I think we were, juniors in high school, maybe 76, somewhere in there?
Yeah, 76.
So, yeah, I mean, I stuck with the Packers, but I liked a bunch of them. Obviously Joe Namath was exciting, the stuff he was pulling off, and all over the place. It's hard to pin just one and go, that's the guy I wanted to be like. Now, way back when I was 10, 11 years old, my sister went to Washington State. We were Husky fans growing up. I still am, and UNLV obviously. But my sister went to Washington State and started dating their quarterback.
Who was that?
Ty Payne.
Yeah. Wow.
Number 14.
Right.
So Jim Sweeney was the coach.
Right.
They had Bernard Jackson, great running back. He was in the backfield. Ken Granberry. And they ran the veer. and Ty was a big guy. He was bigger than us. He was like 6'4", like a 235 kind of guy. And they ran that. They were bad his first couple of years. Then they had a couple of okay seasons. They beat Stanford at Stanford with Plunkett.
Yep.
And I think Stanford went on to be in the Rose Bowl that year, if I'm not mistaken. But so then he was the guy I was trying to impress and be like, and even though I didn't really want an option so much. But I remember a 7th grade football game he came to watch. Opening play, I threw a pick 6. And I don't know if I've ever felt lower. I wanted to cry.
Yeah.
We ended up coming back and winning the game. So just like golf, you have a bad hole, you got to go play the next one. I think that's the biggest key. We're all over the place, but having that ability to not worry about the mistake you just made. That's kind of true with everything, really, but specific to quarterbacks.
Okay, at 64, how's your arm?
My arm's pretty good. It's not as good as it once was trying to go deep, but I think I can still throw it across an NFL field, which is 53 with ease. Like I think I could be high 50s, get lucky for 60, maybe. I want to warm up for a while. I ain't going to do that on the first throw.
Right.
In the old days, Randall threw the ball like 80 for real.
Right.
I was low 70s. This is like at my peak. I'm 21, 22, 23, whatever. I think you don't have the elasticity to do all the way through. But if you talk about 30 yards and in, give me 9 guys in and let me throw at Jerry Rice, we're going to carve you up.
Got it.
Max protection. I'm not moving around. I got my leg, my ankle thing, which we should mention if we're going to do one quick plug.
Yes, please.
So I mentioned earlier how I wrecked my ankle at Oregon. So then, like you said, I'm 64. Every year, every decade, you know how it is. Your probably shoulder hurts like it didn't before and little things like that. But my ankle it was bad. I was to a point I literally considered cutting it off. Like I was in pain every day. I didn't even want to get out of bed. I was probably in depression and wasn't, characterized as that.
Yeah.
So I went to amputation guy. I went to a fusion guy, and I went to a replacement guy. The replacement guy, I was like, okay, so could I play like flag football still? No, we don't want you to run. And I was like, I can already not run. Why would I have a surgery with you for thousands of dollars to not run? You're out. Fusion guy, I've been talked off by a lot of people that it doesn't always work anyway. And now you're just locked. Now you can't do much of anything. Amputation guys saved my life. They're like, dude, you're too young. I was about 53 at the time. Go see this guy in California about this brace. And so I go down there, got in Marmaduke, and I bought this brace from him, and it was a miracle. I could run again. It was a little, no offense to him, he did a good job with what he did. I got Jim Zorn also to get one because he has a ruined left ankle.
Yeah.
Then about 5 years later, I run into a different guy in Gig Harbor, Washington. His name's Ryan Blanc, and he had developed like the next generation of it, right? He gave me the Ferrari. Zorn's got the station wagon still, right?
Yeah.
And I, on the very first day, ran on the treadmill after having, just pain if I were doing anything. Zero pain. So Gretchen, that's my wife, Gretchen and I started a foundation called Run Freely. It's runfreely.org. Tell your rich friends. And I think we're up to like 50-ish. I'd have to count it up. They come in, people send in support, whether it's $10 or $1,000 or whatever. And then every time we get to a certain point, we can tell them, hey, next guy up or next girl up. Mike Penix, the Washington quarterback, helped us with a really generous hour of his time back in April. He threw touchdowns. The people got to keep the ball, get a picture, get a video, get to meet him. And we raised enough for 2 in one day. So we're just kind of going dollar by dollar. But I know it's having an effect because the letters you get back from these veterans, they're so humble and they're so blessed. And, it's pretty cool to do. So I'm glad we've continued that for a few years.
Exactly. Well, listen, man, it was great to catch up with you. I really appreciate you coming on. And I'm gonna sign off for QB Unfiltered. And as always, remember to throw the ball short to guys that can score.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.